Today, I wanted to show you an example that actually comes from real life. I know it's going to sound pretty spooky, but this is an example case of some of the issues that can come up when you're using these AI tools to generate your code. So, what am I doing here? I'm building a simple demo where we're going to have three different products, and then we're going to have prices for those products. And we're going to tell the LLM, can you please optimize my prices by dropping them 10% lower? And what you're going to see is because we weren't specific enough with our instructions to the LLM, we create this recursive death loop where over and over, it's just going to keep dropping the price. And now all of a sudden, that thing that was selling for $1,000, it's now selling for $1. And you sell it to people and you say, hey, that's not actually the price. The law is going to say, well, if you listed it at $1, it's worth $1 and you're out of luck, right? So the real big thing to keep in mind is that computers do exactly what you tell them to do. They don't really understand these things like nuance or vibes. They're just going to do what you tell them to do, even if that means they're building a store that's going to put you out of business. So I already asked Cursor to do some stuff here because just wanted to save some time. So I've already asked it to create an application where we're just going to have three different products at three different price points. And I'm a developer advocate at Quadrant, so of course I had to get Quadrant involved. And the way that we're changing the price points is we're going to look at the most similar product and take the price from the most similar product and make sure that the price for the new product is lower than it is for our similar product. So if you had like a shoe store, for example, you could compare two pairs of sneakers. Hey, this one's so much more expensive. Let's do a little price drop. So I already asked Cursor to generate this code. And now I'm going to run here. Let me clear out my terminal. And hopefully this is big enough for everyone to see. I can blow it up a bit. So now I'm going to run the app that Cursor gave me to run the demo. And you can see already I'm coming up with all of these errors, right? So part of being able to use these AI tools effectively is understanding how programming just works at a fundamental level. Like if you didn't know, for example, that you need to install libraries before you run your application, you might find yourself having a hard time. And in addition, there's just a typo in my file. So if I go to my file at line 70, there's just literally some tick marks that Cursor decided to insert. So this is just like an easy example where it's a pretty simple app, but there's all of these errors that Cursor has in here. And it's like, this is to show you, please, please, please never just copy paste your code from Cursor. Anytime any kind of AI code editor is giving you output, you need to not only look at every single line, but you need to also understand what's happening. Because otherwise, when you start to go into production and you actually want to build something, you're going to end up in this situation, right? Where, like I mentioned, we actually know people who had issues with their pricing because they were using AI to come up with their pricing strategy. And there's a lot of examples of this, right? It's not just this smart pricing. There was the Air Canada example where Air Canada basically refunded tickets that they weren't supposed to. And all of a sudden, people wanted their refunds. Air Canada was like, the AI messed up. And it's like, nope, sorry, you still have to refund people. And then we also have an example like in the legal world, we've seen these lawyers are using AI generated stuff. And what happens is that with the AI generated stuff, the judge was like, hey, this case that you submitted for this isn't a real case. And the lawyers basically got in a lot of hot water, right? So we all know that these LLMs hallucinate, but just be really careful. So here we have the smart pricing engine where we have these three different products, right? Luxury leather handbag, designer leather purse, and cheap canvas tote. And if we click on get dynamic price, we'll see all of a sudden our leather luxury handbag, because it's similar to the cheap canvas tote, has dropped down 97%, right? And we can even reset these prices and just simulate some customer traffic where you'll see eventually we just create this race to the bottom, because if every time you're just checking a similar product and making it 10% lower, After about 10 iterations, you've destroyed the value of your products, right? So to give Cursor and AI code editors a little love, the fact that I was able to spin up this app in 10 minutes, just kind of coding away last night, shows the power of them, right? Because sure, it's not the most beautiful, it's not the most aesthetically pleasing, but this is a functional front end that actually is taking data, putting it into Quadrant, and doing stuff in real time, right? So the beauty of these tools, I would say, is more focused on the front end, because the front end you can visually inspect with your own eyeballs and say, hey, this works or this doesn't. But on the back end, things get a lot more complicated because you don't know something's broken until you find out. And if the wrong thing is broken, you're going to be in a lot of hot water. So here, for example, everything on the site is functional. It gets the dynamic price when I click get dynamic price. The problem is just that obviously we wouldn't want to drop a $500 product to be $12, no matter how competitive that pricing would be, right? So this is an example of kind of a nightmare scenario where it's like, okay, you imagine you're someone who's a big e-commerce site and this is happening, you're going to have a lot of issues, right? So then if we take a look at specifically the code that was messing up, it's from 350 to 360. We've got this get dynamic get dynamic price function. And basically the problem with this function is we're never setting a floor. We're not taking an average. We're just literally iterating over our 3 items, and each time we're dropping the price, right? So what is the solution? Well, let's try running the the fixed, and see what happens. So now if we come back here and we refresh, we've got our fixed implementation, right? It's green because green means you're good to go. So what has changed? We actually have to go and tell Cursor, here is how I want you to handle my pricing. And if you don't have domain expertise in pricing strategy and how humans kind of psychology in terms of sales, then you probably don't want to be writing this code, right? Don't think just because you have a tool that can create code that you can shove it into anything. Because just because you can write the code doesn't mean that you understand A, how to price your items, or B, how your search should work, right? So make sure that you either have that domain expertise when you're taking advantage of these tools so that you can double check your work, or consult with someone who does have that domain expertise. So what did I do? I went and I talked to my friend who runs a drop shipping business, and I said, hey, what do we need to do specifically to get these prices to actually make sense? What are you doing in the real world? So in the real world, what happens is, of course, everyone's using dynamic pricing, especially when your store grows above a certain size, but you manually are going to go in there and set thresholds for both the maximum price and the minimum price, right? That way, when your dynamic pricing algorithm is running, it's never going to take a $500 bag and make it $5. It's also not going to take that $500 bag and make it $1,000. It's going to keep it maybe between 450 and 550, depending on how the traffic is going and how sales are going. Also, instead of using the minimum price, we can use the average price. That way, we can make sure that if something is really, really cheap, it doesn't affect our the movement of our algorithm as much. And then in this way, we can basically now, if we click get dynamic price, it's still pretty rough, right? We just dropped $100 off of it. But when we click it again, it's not going to keep dropping. Same thing for here. It's going to drop, and probably more than we'd want it to, but it's not going to absolutely ruin us, right? So simulate customer traffic, and you see here, okay, these prices went down, but they didn't go down as much as they did when everything was ruined, right? So now this is kind of a way of displaying to you the difference between actually having that domain expertise when you're using these AI coding tools and just running stuff, right? So now let's do a little live demo, right? So I'm going to say I want to add 10 different products to my app, to my fixed app. And One thing, if you ever use these tools or Cursor specifically, like a little pro tip I can give you is that if you use it on auto, it's going to be free and it's going to be a lot cheaper, but the quality of your output is going to be so much more, so much worse, basically, right? So if you're using any of these models, I highly recommend using Sonnet 4.5 on max mode. And that's the way that you're going to get, in my personal opinion, the best output possible. So when we talk about conjuring code with AI, right? The beautiful thing is that if we want to add these 10 different products, it's literally just adding that code to, or sorry, just telling Cursor, hey, please add these 10 different products, right? And then if I come back to this fixed, I should now have 10 products, right? Let's see, did Cursor figure it out? It did. So now we've got 10 products. And there you can see the value of these AI coding tools. If I had to do that manually, it probably would have taken me 5 minutes. Doing it with Cursor, I can do it in 5 seconds, and maybe even more than 5 minutes, right? Because human error and things like that. So now, boom, we've told it to do all of that. What we're going to do now is we're going to switch over to auto mode just to show kind of the difference. And I'm going to say, how are we looking at similar items? And I'm going to fabricate an algorithm, right? So it's going to tell me the way that we're looking at similar similar items right now is we're taking the semantic similarity of the item and we're comparing it to the semantic similarity of other items, right? So we have these embeddings for each item, and our embeddings are just going to turn our data into numbers so that we can compare them. And it's going to say, okay, quadrant is doing some cosine similarity and distance metrics, and that's how we're getting our numbers. I'm going to say, I just created a new algo called the Damiba algorithm. It uses, let's say it uses, I'm trying to think of like a really silly thing. It uses lists and zip to be faster than this implementation. Please do this for me. So I'm using really vague language. I'm literally hallucinating. And the AI is not going to be like, huh, there's no such thing as the Damiba algorithm. It's just going to start coding. And we can even take a look at the output here. This is actually hilarious. I love this. Let's see where the Damiba algorithm is. Oh, well, it looks like it's still generating. But the Damiba algorithm, it's claiming that the Damiba algorithm uses efficient list operations with zip. And then we've got this absolutely, I don't even know. Let me let it finish generating. So yeah, boom, let's go here. So it created this absolutely monstrous function. So let's see what it did. It said, calculate the cosine similarity between two vectors using zip. So basically, this code is doing what quadrant does to some degree, but it's doing it worse. So the computer doesn't really understand, like, it just gave me absolute garbage. And if I go back to my application and I restart it, all right, let me kill it first and restart it. The really, really spooky and scary thing about this is it's still going to appear to work. And if I come here and on my website and I ask to get a dynamic price, these prices are still dropping. So if you were doing just an eye test, or even maybe if you had some automated test, you wouldn't even catch the fact that part of your code is literally a made up algorithm that the AI just decided would work. So to end, let's talk about how can we implement some guardrails to make sure that that doesn't happen, right? One big thing that I like to do is just create a file called like a lot of people are using this agents.md, rules, cursor rules, whatever you want to call it. I would just say like specs.md. Oh, sorry, .md. Specs.md. And then just come in here and literally tell it, one, The site should always have capital letters everywhere, right? And you just have this rule, and then you can say refactor the site considering at specs MD. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. I hope you were basically able to understand that the big takeaway I have for you is when you're using these AI code tools, you must have domain expertise or else you will end up in trouble. You're going to lose money. Your app isn't going to work. So if you don't have that domain expertise, make sure that you're consulting with someone who does, or you're doing your research before you just take code and put it in your code base. And then the second thing is, of course, make sure that you are actually checking the code that Cursor gives you, because if I tell it to just create an algorithm that doesn't exist, it will implement that algorithm. So that is my presentation. Thank you so much, everyone. Once again, my name's Thierry Damiba. I'm from Quadrant. Would love to connect with anyone on LinkedIn. Send me a message. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Thank you very much. That was amazing. I'm going to be looking out for the Damiba